The whistle screamed like a wounded beast across the Wyoming plains, cutting through the haze of dust and heat. The Union Pacific train groaned to a halt beneath a sky streaked with the last fire of evening, its iron frame hissing, panting, exhaling steam like some dying dragon. When the doors clattered open, no one moved. The platform stood empty save for a weather-beaten depot clerk and a man leaning against a post, boots caked in red earth, hat low over his eyes. Then she stepped down. Evelyn Thatcher carried a suitcase with both hands, knuckles white against the worn leather. Her dress was clean but modest, 2 shades behind current fashion and 3 shades too fine for the gritty ground she now stood on. Her hat tilted against the wind, and she clutched the brim as if holding onto dignity itself. No one else disembarked. The conductor, after a pause too long to be polite, tipped his cap, stepped back aboard, and vanished behind the closing door with a metallic slam. The train wailed once more and began to crawl forward, leaving her alone, forgotten before the dust even settled. Across the street, Elijah Hayes shifted his weight, the creak of old leather whispering beneath the low wind. He had come for mail, or so he told himself. In truth, he didn't know why he lingered, day after day, watching the train from a distance like a ghost haunting the edge of a story he no longer belonged in. He watched the woman. She didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't ask for help. She stood upright, lips thin, chin high. But the betrayal clung to her like the powdery dust now settling on her hem. The depot clerk muttered something, scratched his beard, and disappeared into the building. Elijah exhaled slowly. He turned back toward his horse. "Excuse me." Her voice was not loud, but it traveled, a clear tone wrapped in resolve. He stopped, turned. She had crossed the road without hesitation. Closed now, he saw the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the tight braid beneath the travel hat, the layers of restraint holding her together. "I was meant to be met by a man named Reuben Holt," she said. "He sent for me, paid for my passage." Her eyes scanned the empty platform behind her. "He's not here." Elijah said nothing. She studied him a moment, disappointment flickering like a candle in wind. "Do you know him?" "I did." His voice came like gravel, shifting under boot. Her brows furrowed. "Did he died?" Elijah didn't soften the word. There was no use in softening truth on this land. 3 weeks back, kicked by a mule, broke his neck. Evelyn blinked once, then nodded, absorbing the blow like she had expected it all along. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase. "That's unfortunate," she said quietly. "For both of us." Elijah felt a hollow pull in his chest, regret or memory, or some hybrid emotion too raw to name. He had seen soldiers take news like that with less grace. "You got kin anywhere?" he asked finally. She shook her head. "None that would want me. None that I'd trouble." He glanced at the western horizon. The sun dipped low. Coyotes would call soon, and night brought other things. "A woman alone out here" was a sentence written in blood and bone. "Where'll you go?" he asked. "I'll figure it out," she replied. But she didn't move. He watched her shoulders rise and fall. There was no panic in her, only weariness, like someone who'd run out of roads and knew it. "You hungry?" She looked at him then, not startled, just searching for the catch, the joke, the price. He didn't smile. "It's a hard ride. Got stew at home. You can eat. Rest. Ride out with the freight wagon tomorrow." She weighed the offer in silence, a full 10 seconds stretching between them like drawn wire. Then she nodded once. "Thank you," she said. Elijah mounted without further word and extended a calloused hand. She took it. Her fingers were cold but steady as he pulled her up behind him. She settled without complaint, the suitcase slung over one shoulder, balance perfect despite the awkward perch. They rode in silence. The prairie opened before them like a canvas painted in dusk. Grass rolled in waves. Distant cattle dotted the fields like spilled ink. Fences ran crooked and broken, some lost to time and weather. The house came into view only when they were nearly upon it, wooden, weather-worn, crouching low as if wary of the sky. A barn sagged nearby. No lanterns, no smoke. Evelyn dismounted first, dusting her skirt as she landed. "I can sleep in the barn," she said. almost before her boots hit the ground. "You'll take the front room," Elijah replied, already tying the reins. "Barns for animals, not people." She opened her mouth, closed it, followed him to the house. Inside was spare but clean. A single rifle hung above the hearth. A cracked photograph of a young woman in a white dress rested on the mantel. Evelyn paused, gaze lingering, but said nothing. He ladled stew from a cast-iron pot, slid the bowl across the table. She ate quietly, chewing each bite with the precision of a woman who knew the value of hot food. Elijah didn't speak. He watched the firelight flicker in her eyes, the way she sat straight despite exhaustion, the grace in the small things, how she wiped her mouth before speaking, how she thanked him even for water. When she rose to wash her bowl, he noticed the faded scar on her wrist. Circular, deliberate. She caught his glance, but did not explain. "Front room's through there," he said instead. She nodded, picked up her suitcase, paused. "You have a name?" "Elijah," he said. "I'm Evelyn." She held his gaze for a moment. "Thank you, Elijah." Then she disappeared down the hall. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance. Elijah sat alone, bowl untouched, shadows dancing across the walls like old memories clawing to be seen. The wind scraped against the windows. He rose slowly, walked to the porch, lit a pipe. The stars spilled overhead like frost. A woman left behind. A man who'd buried his heart long ago. And the silence of the plains between them, thick with ghosts. In the distance, thunder rolled. Not from storm. Hooves. Elijah narrowed his eyes at the horizon. Something was coming. The wind had changed by morning, sharper, colder, laced with the bite of something unseen. The plains were never still, but today they felt watchful, as though the land itself held its breath. Evelyn stood at the edge of the porch, boots newly cleaned, but already dusted with the soil of this place. Her dress clung to her ankles in the wind. Before her stretched an endless horizon of faded green and stubborn brown, broken only by fence posts that leaned like tired soldiers and a herd of cattle no bigger than ants in the distance. Elijah was already out there, alone, moving through the fields on horseback, checking lines, counting heads. He hadn't said a word when he saddled up, but he had left a folded piece of jerky and a tin cup of coffee beside the stove. The quiet unnerved her more than words ever could. She'd known silence before. In her mother's parlor, after the fever took her sister. In the hallways of a convent that considered women past 30 better suited to prayer than promise. But this quiet was something else. Not empty, but full of tension, like a held breath or the stillness before a storm. Inside the house, every board creaked like it remembered something better. The bed she'd slept in was soft but unused. The embroidered pillow had the scent of lavender in time. Someone had once cared about details here. Folded edges, clean seams. Not a woman's touch, but a man holding onto what a woman had left behind. She had seen the grave behind the barn that morning, nestled under a crooked pine, the name etched roughly into the stone. Mara Hayes. Beloved wife. August 8th, 1886. 3 years. And still, no one else had laid claim to this place. Evelyn set to work. Not out of duty, but instinct. She swept the floor, dusted shelves, gathered laundry that had hung too long in still air. Her hands itched for purpose. She was not going to be another ghost in this house. The stew pot was near empty. She built a fire, ground what beans she could find, and boiled water for bread. The kitchen was spare but functional, like everything here. No room for indulgence, but nothing left undone. There was a rhythm to it, like a life half-remembered. A shadow passed by the window. She turned just as the front door opened. Elijah entered, coat streaked with mud, one sleeve torn and dark with blood. His eyes went to her, then to the pot simmering on the stove. "Elk fence is down," he said. She pointed to his sleeve. "That's not all. Barbed wire. Caught it fixing the post." He removed the coat, unbuttoned the sleeve. She stepped forward before he could stop her. Took his arm gently. The gash was clean but deep, running from wrist to elbow in a jagged line. "You'll need stitching. I've had worse. Then you know this needs attention." He said nothing, but didn't pull away. She found a clean rag, boiled water, poured a bit of whiskey over the wound. He hissed, but held still. She threaded a needle in silence, his breath warm against her cheek as she leaned close. "You've done this before," he murmured. Her hands paused. "Once," she said. "A long time ago." He didn't ask. She didn't explain. When she finished, he rolled his sleeve back down, flexed his fingers. "Thank you," he said quietly. She poured him coffee. He drank it standing, eyes distant. "I can help with the fence tomorrow," she offered. He looked at her, measuring the weight of the offer. "It's not easy work. I didn't come here looking for easy." That earned her a nod. The sun dropped lower, bleeding across the plains. They sat on the porch as twilight crept in, sharing a silence that was, this time, not empty. Coyotes called from the ridge, answered by others farther off. Wind stirred the grass like whispers. Then a soft shuffle behind them. Elijah stood slowly, hand moving instinctively to the rifle beside the door. Evelyn followed, eyes narrowing as a figure stepped into the fading light from behind the barn. He was tall, sinewy, wearing buckskin and a necklace of carved bone. His hair was tied back in a black braid. A long knife hung from his hip. His eyes were unreadable, dark as shadow. "Coda," Elijah said. "Didn't expect you back this soon." The man nodded. His gaze drifted to Evelyn, sharp, measuring. "She's staying," Elijah added. Coda said nothing, then turned and walked to the edge of the barn, where a small lean-to stood half-hidden beneath a tarp. He knelt, began unpacking a satchel, movements fluid and silent. "Who is he?" Evelyn asked. "Tracker," Elijah replied. "Helps during calving. Stays out near the river mostly." "Does he live here?" "He comes and goes." Elijah didn't elaborate, but the lines in his face told her enough. There was history there, complicated, possibly sacred. As darkness settled, the air grew heavy with scent, earth, firewood, the faint copper of dried blood. Evelyn lit the lamp in the front window. Inside, the shadows seemed to breathe. Later, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the night. A rustle of wind, a creak of wood, then a sound, low, throaty. She sat up. Another noise, closer, a sharp thud, then scratching at the door or the wall. She rose, heart quickening, wrapped herself in her shawl, crept down the hall. Elijah was already there, rifle in hand. His eyes found hers. He gestured toward the back door. They moved together, wordless. Outside, the moon cast pale light across the field. A shadow moved near the chicken coop. Then another, larger. Coyotes. But something about them was wrong. Too bold, too still. Elijah raised the rifle. Fired once. A shape yelped and vanished. Another darted across the yard and disappeared behind the barn. He lowered the weapon slowly. Evelyn watched him, breath caught in her chest. "Fence is too low back near the east line," he muttered. "They know it." Coda, already there. The tracker emerged from the darkness like smoke, knife glinting in his hand. He nodded once, then slipped into the shadows again. Elijah turned to Evelyn. His expression was unreadable. "You all right?" She nodded, but her voice caught. "This place, it's more than I expected. It always is." She stepped closer, something in her chest tightening. "Are they gone?" "For now." Her hands trembled, not from fear, from the quiet after. He noticed. She hated that he noticed. "You were brave," he said. She met his eyes. "No, I was terrified." "Same thing," he replied. They stood in silence, just long enough for the wind to shift again, cooler now, whispering secrets in a language neither of them yet understood. Somewhere behind them, the old pine groaned. And something, somewhere, kept watching. Dust shimmered along the horizon like heat off a forge. Elijah stood at the top rail of the corral, arms crossed, watching the line of riders grow nearer. 5 of them. No banners, no greetings. Just the steady beat of hooves and the gleam of rifles slung against sun-darkened saddles. Evelyn saw them from the kitchen window, her hands still damp from rinsing the last plate. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, the air suddenly dense and brittle. She reached for the pistol Elijah had left under the cupboard, just in case. Today, just in case had arrived. Coda emerged from the barn without a word. moving like a shadow slipping between dimensions. He gave Elijah a single glance, then disappeared toward the back of the property, where the brush grew thick and the fence was weakest. He was always the silent insurance against what couldn't be reasoned with. The riders stopped just shy of the fence line. Dust settled. Their leader, a man built like an ox, with a mottled beard and a black coat too fine for this country, tipped his hat. "Afternoon," he called. His voice carried the oily slickness of charm turned sour. Elijah didn't move. "You're 2 miles inside my land." The man smiled. "Funny thing about land. Only holds meaning when someone's around to defend it." Evelyn stepped onto the porch, pistol hidden behind her skirt. Elijah saw her, gave a fractional shake of the head. "Not yet." The rider dismounted. His boots hit the ground with a thud that echoed too loud. His men remained on their horses, hands resting near their weapons. "Name's Merrin," the man said. "I've been riding these parts the last year. Word is, you've got good pasture. Quiet, isolated. The kind of place a man could expand into." "This land's claimed," Elijah said flatly. "I know," Merrin replied, smile faltering. "That's why I came to offer terms. I'm not selling." Didn't say anything about selling. Now Elijah moved, slow and deliberate, stepping down from the rail and toward the fence. The tension grew thick enough to choke on. "I buried my wife here," he said. "Every fence post you see, I hammer myself. I won't hand it over to vultures who haven't worked a day on it." Merrin's eyes narrowed. "Careful how you talk to men with loaded guns and fewer reasons to show mercy." "I've survived war," Elijah said, his voice like dry gravel. "I've faced men with more hate in their hearts than you can even spell. You think I scare easy?" The two stared across the fence, as if it were a battlefield drawn in blood. A flicker of movement. Coda, now behind the riders, bow half-drawn, arrow-tipped and ready. Evelyn's breath caught. One wrong word would ignite it all. Merrin gave a forced laugh, but his eyes darted sideways. He'd sensed something. He clicked his tongue and stepped back toward his horse. "No need for sparks today," he said. "But you should know, this land, it's drawing attention. Not just from me. There's more change coming down the line than fences can hold back." He mounted, eyes lingering on Evelyn now. "Nice to see you've got company. Wouldn't want her loneliness to make you too desperate for company like ours." Elijah's jaw clenched. Evelyn gripped the pistol tighter. But Merrin only smiled, turned, and signaled his men. They rode off in silence, kicking up dust like a retreating storm. Only when they vanished beyond the rise did Coda lower his bow and return. Elijah turned to Evelyn. "You all right?" She nodded, but the color in her cheeks told another story. "He'll be back," she said softly. "Yes," Elijah replied. "With more." The sky dimmed as twilight fell fast and hard. Inside, they lit lanterns, every flicker of flame a reminder of the dark pressing against the walls. Coda stood at the table, drawing a rough map into the dust with his finger. "They'll come from the west. Creek runs low there. Easy to cross with horses. But they'll test the east first, fewer trees." "Can we hold them?" Evelyn asked. Elijah didn't answer immediately. Then, "Not if it's just the three of us." She looked at Coda. "You have friends?" He shook his head once. "But I owe debts." "Then call them," she said. "We need every soul we can get." Coda left without a word. That night, the house held its breath. Elijah sat in the armchair by the fire, the rifle on his lap, eyes unfocused but body tense. Evelyn sat across from him, her mended skirt brushing the floor as she folded laundry she'd already folded twice. The silence was no longer companionable. It was charged. "Why did you take me in?" she asked suddenly. Elijah didn't look up. "You needed a place." "That's not an answer." He exhaled. "Because I remember what it's like to be left behind. And because I saw something in your eyes. You weren't done fighting." She studied him. The lines around his mouth, the way he held his body like a man expecting bullets at any moment. But there's kindness there too, quiet and weathered. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not if you'll have me. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to." In the firelight, their silence deepened into something warm and brittle. Unspoken but understood. Outside, the wind shifted again. The coyotes didn't howl that night. Only the creak of old wood and the hum of something ancient stirring in the land. Watching, waiting. By dawn, the horizon held no riders. But they knew dusk would bring more than shadows. The wind came in hard from the west, dry and full of warning. Elijah stood on the porch, the rifle in his hand steady, his eyes trained on the ridge where the dust cloud had begun to rise. Merrin was returning, and this time, he wasn't bringing just threats. Beside him, Evelyn adjusted the shawl around her shoulders, her pistol tucked at her waist, eyes narrowed against the sunlight. Her hands no longer trembled like they once had. Whatever fear she'd carried when she stepped off that train had turned into something tougher, quieter. She was no longer just a woman abandoned. She was a woman standing her ground. Coda appeared from the grove, silent as always. Behind him came 3 more riders, rough men with solemn faces and worn rifles. They said little as they dismounted, exchanging nods with Elijah. One removed a necklace of bone and feathers, offering it silently to Coda. Whatever history tied them together, it didn't need explaining. They were here to fight. The sun inched higher as hours dragged by. Every creak of saddle leather, every crow's cry made hearts skip. Elijah walked the fence line again and again, eyes scanning for weak points. Evelyn helped set up barricades along the east pasture, where the trees were thin. They laid traps in the tall grass, sharpened stakes, dug trenches. When the riders came, it was just past noon. Dust rolled like thunderclouds, and the hooves of 20 men split the earth. At their head rode Merrin, his black coat flapping like a vulture's wings, a pistol already drawn. There was no attempt at diplomacy this time. They fanned out across the ridge, rifles lifted, cutting off retreat. "Last chance, rancher." Merrin's voice cracked the sky. "Hand it over, and I'll let the girl live." Elijah stepped into the open, rifle across his chest, boots planted like tree roots. "She's not a bargaining chip," he shouted back. "And this land isn't for sale." A shot rang out. The bullet struck the fence post inches from his shoulder, splintering wood in silence. Then came chaos. Riders charged from both sides, rifles blazing. Elijah dropped low and fired, dropping a man from his saddle. Evelyn ducked behind the water trough, returning fire with practiced calm. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. This wasn't fear, this was purpose. Coda moved like wind through the brush, his arrows finding targets before they could raise their guns. One of Merrin's men caught an arrow to the throat, fell without a sound. The other allies held the flank, covering the north edge with relentless fire. They didn't shout or cheer. They fought like men with debts to pay and no intention of dying with them unpaid. Elijah was everywhere at once, dragging a wounded ally behind cover, reloading in the open, returning fire with grim precision. His face was streaked with sweat and dust, and blood soaked through his sleeve, but he didn't slow. Every breath he took was one more for the land he loved. Evelyn saw a rider break through the eastern trench and rush toward the house. She didn't think. She ran from cover and tackled him off his horse. They rolled in the dirt, his knife flashing in the sun. She took a cut to the shoulder, but her pistol found its mark. The rider collapsed, twitching. She stood slowly, blood running warm down her arm. Elijah saw her, eyes wide, but she nodded once. She was still standing. And then there was Merrin. He came straight through the center, horse kicking up a trail of fury, revolver raised. Elijah turned just in time, but Merrin fired first, his bullet tearing into Elijah's leg. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched. Merrin dismounted mid-charge, stalking forward like a man possessed. "I told you," he growled. "You should have run." "I did," Elijah spat. "All my life. But not anymore." He raised a rifle. The 2 men fired at the same moment. Merrin's bullet grazed Elijah's ribs, slicing skin. But Elijah's shot struck true, center mass. Merrin stumbled, eyes wide, confusion blooming as he fell to his knees, then forward into the dust. The world held its breath. The remaining riders, seeing their leader fall, began to scatter. Some dropped weapons and rode hard away. Others were cut down before they could flee. The thunder of battle gave way to silence again, broken only by the ragged breathing of the wounded. Coda approached Merrin's body, bow still in hand. He turned the man over with his foot, then looked up at Elijah and gave a single nod. It was done. Evelyn reached Elijah just as he slumped against the porch. She knelt beside him, hands pressed to his side, eyes wide with worry. "You stay with me," she whispered fiercely. "You stay. You hear me?" Elijah grinned through the pain. "You planning on running the ranch yourself? I'll run you if you don't shut up and let me stitch this." He laughed, then winced. "You're bossy when people are bleeding. Only when they're mine." Silence hung there for a moment. Heavy. Honest. "You mean that?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, eyes shimmering but proud. "I do, if you'll still have me." "I already do," he said. They sat on that porch as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across broken fences and blood-stained soil. But the wind was calm now, and the birds had returned to the trees. Coda stepped up, handed Elijah a piece of cloth for the wound, and looked at Evelyn with something like approval. Then he disappeared into the grove once more, the warrior fading into legend. That night, they buried the dead. Elijah carved Merrin's name into a stone and left it unmarked on the northern ridge. Even enemies deserved a grave. The others were given rites, simple and quiet. Fires burned low. The land had been defended, not without cost, but with honor. Evelyn watched the stars appear, one by one. She sat beside Elijah, her hand in his, her shoulders stitched and bandaged. "Think they'll come back?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, "but we'll be ready." The quiet settled around them like a promise. There were fences to mend, livestock to tend, a house to rebuild, but there was also something more, a kind of peace neither had known. Not the end of loneliness, but the beginning of something earned, something fought for, something forever.